Okay, we're starting the meeting for the August 29th, 2022 Finance, Buildings, and Ground Committee meeting agenda. Our first item on the agenda tonight is the high school library and alternate LGI schematic design and cost estimate update. And we have Danielle Hoffer from the Schrader Group presenting.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here tonight to present what we've been doing for the last several months for the library renovations, and we're also looking at this space too. So I'm kind of glad we're in this space so I can actually point to things and show you what we're planning on doing. So I'd like to just kind of go through the process that we've gone through to date and then show you some of the concepts that we're planning on. And then we kind of got to end with the budget, which is usually not the most pleasant part of the conversation, but it all brings us back down to reality a little bit. So I am going to ask the gentleman to advance the slideshow as we go along here. And let's get started. So for the first month of the process, which began back in May of this year, it was basically a data collection process. We were gathering our drawings, trying to understand existing conditions. We met bi-weekly with your administrative team so that we could understand what the program was and what the existing conditions were. We did surveys of the architectural, the structural, and MEP systems. Our team consists of the Schrader Group, which is an architectural and structural engineering firm, and Alban Engineering, who, as you well know, is your mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer, and we're using them on as part of our team. And so one of the major things we really wanted to understand is what are the program requirements. So if you go to the next slide. Something we've been asked by many school districts is how can we re-envision our library? As you know, when we went to school, or when I went to school, the library is used very differently than it is now. When I went to school, back in high school, you went to the library to do your research. And now all your research can be done in the palm of your hand or on your laptop. So the purpose of the library changes as time changes. And so we were asked to take a look at how other schools are doing it and how we could re-envision what the library looks like. So this plan shows what we call a demolition drawing. And what I want to draw your attention to, other than just removal of all the existing furniture, are the rooms on the right-hand side of that slide. Currently, there's several rooms that are made up of copy room, classroom on the bottom left-hand corner, some additional storage space. We wanted to take a look at that and see how we could repurpose that, because one of the things that the students like to do when they come to the library is a couple of things, either work independently or work together in groups. And so we want to create a variety of different spaces within the library where they can do that. And so when we go to the next slide, we'll show you what that looks like. We want to be cognizant of the existing structure that's in the library, so we don't want to remove any columns that are holding up the roof, obviously. So we were working around how we could reconfigure those spaces using the existing column locations. One of the things that you'll see, actually, if you could go back one slide quickly. In the library space, again, in the classroom space down in the bottom left-hand corner of the library, that space is used as a classroom, and there's a jog in it where there was a book drop back in the day, and that's not being used any longer. So it kind of makes this room a little bit awkward. And then as you enter into the library, at the top of the screen there, you'll see that we're removing some walls there so that we can provide access into the librarian's workroom as well as that office space to the right of that. Okay, next slide. One of the things you'll notice is that the furniture configuration shown in this plan is much different than it exists now. The furniture that you see is going to be part of what we call a furniture, fixtures, and equipment package. That's part of a separate contract other than what the contractors actually bid. That furniture will be able to be moved around. It's going to be on casters so that the library shelving, the chairs, the tables, everything can move around. So that configuration can change depending on how the librarian wants to set it up. But again, it's trying to create a variety of different spaces within the space. The classroom, as you can see, when we remove that book drop area, now is more of a rectangular space and can be used in a variety of different configurations with the rearrangement of tables and chairs. We've created in the center there 2 small group instruction areas. Again, can be set up in a variety of different ways. There is a projection screen in those 2 rooms, so students can get together and collaborate with other students. And then we have another space above that, which is similar to what we call a maker space. It has casework in there, a sink in there, so it has storage of the various types of units that they could use for a variety of different projects. And then we've maintained the top right left-hand corner, the storage area. We're actually showing what we call high-density shelving, because that storage room is a little unorganized as it exists now. All right, next slide. So I wanted to share some before and after pictures with you, because sometimes that's helpful of understanding what we're talking about. So when you enter in the library, the first thing that you notice is just the number of shelves in the space, the old wooden shelves that appear to be kind of just heavy and weighed down. The first thing you see after you look at the couches in front of you is the circulation desk. And what we wanted to do is really kind of open up that view and draw you into the space, because the space you really want to get to is that high volume space with a beautiful view to the valley. So this is the before, and then this is the after shot. So we have some furniture and some soft seating on the right and left-hand side as you enter into it, and the circulation desk is is still central, but just over to the right there. So you have that visual connection back into the library, deep into the library. Next slide. This is a view, when computers came along, now we have to have a station for computers. And that usually was in a confined area in the library. Well, now it can be anywhere within the library, and then you can see all the stacks, again, associated with the collection. The other thing that's front and center of this picture is the columns. And so how can we soften that and making them a little less obtrusive? Next slide. So what we're doing is encasing those columns in what we call plastic laminate enclosure. It's a cost-effective way to just bring a little bit more richness into the space. And as you can see, we're creating other areas within that space, some high-top seating, some soft seating areas, some tables, so kids can pull the seating around and configure it any way that they want to. Next slide. In this picture, what we're looking at are those rooms that I was pointing out that we're reconfiguring a bit. And the wall construction is all concrete block, and so you're basically closed off. It's not very transparent between the library space into those classroom areas. And so you look at the next slide, what we've done is we've opened up those areas with glass. And so you have that visual connection. Actually, we're standing where the circulation desk, so that the librarian has that visual connection into every one of those workspaces where the students are working together. And the next slide, similar view, again, looking down over to the classroom at the end of that row. And the view, again, on the next slide shows how open up that is. And again, you can arrange the seating however you want. Next slide. This is the library classroom. I've kind of spliced 2 rooms to get 2 pictures together. But in the top right-hand corner is that indentation of the library book drop and the entrance coming into that. We're actually going to close that entrance off and square off the room, provide a couple of different teaching walls so that, again, you can use this classroom in a lecture type of situation or of a multi-group scenario where you can group tables together. Trying to provide flexibility within that space is our ultimate goal. Next slide. So now we're getting into that high volume space, which is a beautiful space, natural light coming in with the clear stories. One of the other things that we're addressing as part of the project is the HVAC and humidity control for this, because that area heats up quite a bit with the sun coming in the window there. And then you can see all the heavy furniture again. So we would lightening that up, providing a variety of different furniture configurations in there. And this is going to become really the student work area. We're providing acoustical panels all the way around the perimeter, if you can see above the column caps there, and then a wood detail to match the column covers. And then to direct your vision up to that vaulted ceiling, we are doing some acoustical treatments by creating a ceiling just below the ceiling of acoustical tile, but also creating some visual interest with some wavy, translucent figures, as well as some teardrop lighting coming down into that space. So we're providing a couple of different, I mean, you don't even need artificial light in that space during the day, but I think that'll really pop it in the evening with that teardrop lighting. Next. Just another view of that. Again, it's all the shelving is completely saturated in the center of that space. And so we're pulling all the shelving around the perimeter and using that center space as usable student space. Another thing that we've been doing, next slide, is really working on the interior finishes. What we've done, we've looked at the carpet samples, many carpet samples, and just to get a little technical here, the carpet sample that we selected, and that will also be in this area too that we're proposing, is a non-directional pattern in the carpet, neutral color, gray. It kind of grounds the room with having a saturated color on the floor. But we didn't want to have it all stripes going in one direction because then it would be way too linear. So we really kind of made it a little bit of movement in that. Not too much, but a little bit of movement in the carpet pattern. The shelving, we are doing metal shelving with a gray panel on the side to try to pull that color in. And with the metal shelving, it's open, so you don't have, it feels lighter. It doesn't feel as massive and heavy as the wood shelving of old used to be. Next slide. Okay, one of the other things that we were asked to look at was this room. It is used for a variety of different things throughout the day, as well as your board meetings and committee meetings. So it's a very public space, and we were looking at ways that we could possibly improve the aesthetics of it, the acoustics of it, as well as the HVAC for it. So if you go to the next slide, in plan, we're basically looking at demolishing this concrete block wall here, and what's ideal about that is you've got a beautiful courtyard on the other side of this. It faces north, so you're not going to get direct sunlight coming into the room. And there's columns. You can see these vertical elements here. Those are columns, and so we can remove the infill between the columns without any difficulty. So if you can see, look in this particular picture, we're looking at removing the corners of the masonry to open that up, and then using this as our main projection wall. One of the other issues you have is that when you have this as your projection wall, it's a long distance here for the public to see the screen. So if we center that, if you go to the next slide, we can rearrange the room a variety of different ways. You can have your board table at the front of the room here, and you can wrap the seating all the way around this area here so you can get your seating capacity. And by the way, we're reusing these chairs because you just bought them. And that brings the red in, which is your school colors. Or you can use, we're going to keep this teaching wall, this projection wall, and the room can be arranged in a variety of different ways. You can have seating over here, you can have another seating over here with your white marker boards on this side of the room. Flexibility, we're just trying to provide a flexible space as well as improve the aesthetics and the acoustics. The other thing that we're doing is, you see the ceiling, all this popcorn finish here? We're proposing to remove all that encasement of the structural steel and open up this volume space. And so this is what you're looking at now. This is basically my view of what I'm looking at now. Next slide. Oops, I think you went the wrong way. And you can see, now you can see the structural element, which is this beam right here, and doing a drop ceiling here. So now what we're doing is we're addressing the acoustics, we're bringing down the height of that, really making it a little bit more cozy, providing some interesting lighting, and then you have all that natural, beautiful natural light that you can either keep that open, or we'll also have Meco shades that will drop down so you can darken the room as well. Next slide. And you can see the different seating arrangement in this slide.
Just a quick question
Yeah.
on that slide. So is the drop ceiling going to be below the ductwork? Are we moving ductwork as well?
The ductwork will be above it.
Okay. We're utilizing the same ductwork, or we're redoing
No, we're
that?
replacing it.
Replacing it, okay.
Yep, so the ductwork in here will be replaced, and the humidity will be controlled. You can hear that. I'm going to minimize that because you don't want to have that white noise. Sometimes you don't notice it, but we're trying to minimize that as much as possible. And then you can see the picture of its existing condition, which you can see right here. And next slide. Again, proposing to use the same carpet that we proposed in the library area, and then just neutral colors around the rest of the walls. And then get the pop of color with your chairs. Next slide. When we go through the cost estimate, what we've done is we've broken out the cost for the library work, the LGI is an alternate, and then there's another alternate that we're going to propose, and that's to replace the HVAC ductwork in the library. If you look on this side of the library, you see the vents in the picture there. If we were sitting in that room and the air conditioning was going, you would hear the same whirling, you would hear that white noise. And that's because the ductwork on the other side of that wall was undersized, and so what's happening is that the volume of air is being compressed into too small of ductwork, and so you're getting that whizzing sound. So there's an alternate that we have in our cost estimate to replace that ductwork, and in doing so, we need to remove the ceilings, replace the ductwork, replace the ceilings in that. It's just an option. Again, it's an alternate that we would bid out for your determination if you wanted to pursue that. Next slide. So we did a design, we're at design development phase right now. We did a design development cost estimate. And as you can see, we broke out the numbers there for the base project, which we're considering as the library scope. There is no site work, obviously. It's all interior renovations, as well as the alternates. So we're looking at, now this is just construction costs. So for the building construction, if you go to the next slide, building construction is over 1.7 million. The alternate for the LGI construction costs to renovate this room and to remove the walls for the windows is just under 800,000. And then the ductwork replacement, which I talked about for alternate 2, is just under $40,000. Now, what we did as part of this cost estimate, we're basing these numbers on current bids that we have coming in. So we're using cost per square foot based on those recent bids. We're still carrying a 6% escalation. One of the things that we're, I would say, nervous about, to be honest, with it was where the costs have been going with inflation, with shortages of materials, with timelines. So we're addressing that in terms of our cost estimate by maintaining that escalation factor and continuing to monitor where bids are coming in. We have another bid coming in next month that will again review all of our cost estimates to determine if we're on target. If you go to the next slide, the other thing that we're doing is if we are approved to move ahead with the project to go out to bid, that would keep us on schedule. What we're trying to do is get these construction documents and specifications out to bid in October. We're trying to get, number one, ahead of the rush. The spring bidding season is the prime bidding season, so if we can get ahead of that, that's to our advantage. The other thing we want to do is get the contractors going early enough so we can get the shop drawings and the equipment and finishes procured in time so that we have it ready to go and hit the ground running in the summer of 2023 for construction. So all of this thing is done very systematically so that we can get, the bids in favorably, as well as get the construction done in the summer as planned. Anybody have any questions?
So you mentioned that the furniture was separate from the construction bid cost. Do you have a guess or an estimate on what that furniture would be?
Yeah, Jackie and I were working on the soft costs. For the furniture for the library, it's about $150,000 to about $175,000, depending what the actual selection is. Depending on where the bids come in, we can make some adjustments of what type of furniture, but that's kind of figuring KI furniture as well as some of the more interesting types of furniture that are kind of create interest in that room, some soft seating, that type of thing. That doesn't include whatever tables you buy in here. Like I said, the chairs we will be reusing. So again, those are things that can be bought over time. In the bid cost, that does include the library shelving as well as the circulation desk. So that 1.7 million does include those numbers.
And how about any existing or any additional technology? You know, we were talking about screens and things of that sort.
I think Jackie has been doing research on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that. I spoke with Paul and we've worked with Steve in order to make sure we're designing the backbone to handle the enhanced technology. So we're estimating maybe 50,000 for all of that. There will be additional monitors, screens, projectors. The computers really they're already in our ongoing technology refresh budget, so we don't really have to worry about that. Maybe a few desktops to replace, but other than that, that's where we're at.
All right, my next question would be regards to shelving. So are we maintaining the same shelving volume that we currently have? Are we losing some?
Yeah, in talking to
like?
the librarian, she has gone through a purge of her collection. We are trying to reduce that a little bit more to give you a little bit more flexibility in that space, but I think the number of shelves that are currently shown are definitely less than what you currently have now. But like I said, district can continue to buy shelves as needed. We're just trying to provide ideas of what that would look like, and that's a whole nother shopping exercise on the district's part.
Okay. Currently, I think we have some desktop computers for students to use in the library. The renderings didn't have any of those. Would we be providing desktop computers, or is everyone just using Chromebooks now?
There wouldn't be desktop computers, but I mean, both Paul and Steve are here, and they probably could address exactly how they envision that space. But I'm sure because we're moving to one-to-one, they'll have their own devices.
Sure, we're going to have a couple of high-end, so they can do editing for film and production machines, with very little. They'll be in the back, so there'll be some. But what you see in there is going to be considerably less because they're using the Chromebooks left and right. So that's the main device. And if you see the openness in that area and the wireless and the infrastructure, it's going to handle that space wonderfully and the new room. So, but there will be some high-end, you know, who forgot, who can't needs to print, who wants to do some video production, that's going to be available there too.
Right, and I believe one of the spaces that when Danny was reviewing it, right now it's kind of like a kitchen area, that's going to actually be turned into like a maker space. So there'll be all kinds of equipment,
Printers
things
and
like that, and printers in there.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I love the idea of opening things up and having all these windows and everything, but I think what we should definitely do as part of this is to make sure that we have security review of, you know, what the new configuration would look like from a standpoint of defending the space. You know, in the event of an active shooter, does opening up some of these windows, like to the courtyard or within the library, does that cause any security issues?
We can certainly do that. We can have John take a look at that in discussion with Steve Kohler, who's here. It's a fully contained interior courtyard, so that's a plus. And I'm sure there are different ratings of glass too that we could also take a look at based on how we've done prior construction.
Yeah, I was just thinking of, you know, if someone were to get into the library, where would you hide? I didn't really see any space, which is a terrifying thought to even have to think about as an administrator, but I kind of think we should do our diligence in that space.
I guess to add to that, there's only one entrance then and one exit?
Yeah, that's, if you could go back to the floor plan, one thing I didn't point out, and this raises a good point, Currently, the second means of egress out of the library is through the storage room and out to the corridor, if you know where that is. Here. One more back. So right now, there's a door coming out here, so the egress for this library is either through here or all the way through there, which is not. Advance it one more. What we're gonna do is take the window out here and put it door through here. So what we're seeing with security now is that it used to be either hide, and now it's get out. So that provides a direct means of egress right outside and to run, to get away. So I think that's an improvement overall in security with that.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Just getting back to the cost of this for a second. Remind me again, what was allocated in the budget for this year to cover the cost of the project?
Sure. The original budget that we allocated, not having a cost estimate professionally prepared, was $1.5 million. And that was using, since 2017, when we originally initiated the project, that has been put on hold several times, 3% escalation clause. Obviously, the budget was done last spring. So they're using a 6% contingency, which I think is more appropriate for right now. But that was what the original budget was approved, knowing that we requested them to do some cost estimates. So there are funds in the capital project fund in order to, if we were to go out to bid and award contracts for this amount. And I think what Danny was referencing is, if the board is still comfortable with us going out to bid, we would go out to bid. Now, when the bids come back, that's really where the rubber meets the road. If it's much, much higher than this, we'll be recommending that we regroup. We still have a very wonderful design, but maybe the timing wouldn't have been right. So really, there's still a lot up in the air with respect to that. But we still believe, based on because you are having bids go out and come back in right now, that it's a reasonable cost estimate, so.
So I'm looking at the breakdown of the three separate projects, library, LGI, and then the ductwork replacement total comes to about 2.6 million. So are you saying that we would have money allocated or budgeted to cover all three of those projects, or are we just looking at the library construction cost?
We're going to do, we recommend definitely the library. We're requesting the LGI bid, an alternate bid. So if the pricing comes back and it's reasonable, we would want to move forward with that. That was a request of the prior B&G committee to look at this space as an alternate.
Okay.
So, and I'll just be honest, we're not so sure that we would recommend the other alternate for the ductwork replacement in the library.
But what's the allocated number? Because I think Dan was getting to, is 2.6 million in the budget, or is 2 million in? What's in the budget that we have?
The budget right now that the board approved in the spring, before this estimate came in, was $1.5 million.
Okay, so if we did all this, it'd be an additional million.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
It's actually like 3 million when you include the furniture and some of the other technology pieces that we talked about, so.
And then, so $250 a square foot rough. Well, you said it's 11,000 square feet?
A little over.
Is that total, or is that just library?
That's
That
total, because I think, isn't the library like, I don't know, 8,500
The library is
or so?
8,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're like, we're like 2.6, so call it, 240, 250 a square foot. Is that what's coming in renovation, construction costs right now?
Unfortunately, because what we saw like 2 years ago was a 12% inflationary increase. Now it's about 8 to 10. We're seeing that starting to creep down, hoping to get to 4 here in the next year or so. So that, if your budget was really conceived of in 2017, there's been some definite inflationary costs.
So what's a standard like renovation cost per square foot?
10 years ago, it could have been $180 a square foot. So what you're referencing here isn't unusual at all for a renovation.
Okay.
So how many bids do we put out for? Do we usually get?
Well, we issue the drawings to bid, and we put it out on the market. So we're not asking specific contractors to do it. It's a public bidding environment. So we upload our drawings to a company, and they're the ones that electronically, thank God, we don't have to print everything all the time now. We'll send it out to contractors, and so we'll maintain a list. It's going to be probably 3 primes. The plumbing is 1 sink, so that'll probably be a combined mechanical plumbing bid, but we'll have GC, electrical, and mechanical fire protection bid. And we'll, pound the market, pound the ground, trying to find contractors to try to bid it. We have a whole bunch of contractors that we work with, so. And again, trying to get ahead of it before they've got all of their lineup for the summer, trying to get into, because it's not a big project, it's not a brand new, high school or anything like that, so try to make it as attractive as we can by getting up front with it.
Right, and I also think the procurement timeline is really important, similar to when we did the Gasa project. We went out in the fall, and we were able to lock in our pricing then, plus the lead time for ordering HVAC and equipment like that. So whenever we're doing these summer projects, we really need to go backing them up this much right now.
How much of this is the casework and the millwork around, because it looks like a lot of cosmetic wrapping. Is that a significant piece of it versus, the GC work seems on the smaller side. It looks more of the mechanicals and the casework, millwork.
Yeah, I mean, you have the demolition of those walls, those masonry walls, and the glass partitions that we're putting back in, and it's finishes, and it's lighting, and it's ceilings, and it's mechanical. Electrical, you got a lot of electrical over there. There's a lot of floor boxes over there in the library. You probably don't know where you can see them, but there wasn't a lot of changes that we need to do on the electrical side.
Is that a concrete floor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can share the detail, Paul, but there's a breakdown here.
Okay, I'll take, could
Yeah.
you send that, sir?
Sure.
Thanks. And then if we did go forward, what's the lead time on this stuff now as we're looking at, what's the biggest bottleneck that we're gonna run into if we said, bids look good, let's go, what's a reasonable timeline?
Well, HVAC in my mind is the equipment that's the longest lead time, but I'll let Danny talk on her experience.
Yeah, as far as equipment is concerned, you're right. You're absolutely right. We have some new units that we're putting on the roof, and so those are going to need to be ordered as quickly as possible. Don't ask me what the lead time is. I'm guessing 16 weeks, something like that, but don't quote me on that because I know them for sure, because I'm not a mechanical engineer. But those are the kinds of numbers that we've been seeing. Thank God we don't need to have an emergency generator or switch gear or anything like that, because we've been getting slammed on our projects trying to get those things in, so. It's doable.
Thank you.
Just another question, maybe Dr. Stout or Ms. Soder, you could answer this for me. If we're going to make this investment, talk to me about the opportunities looking at the library. What does this open up for our teachers in terms of classroom instruction? Does this offer opportunity for interdisciplinary teaching opportunities? I want to know how that space is going to be utilized versus how it's being utilized now.
The library in the high school is used every class period, and literally there are students standing outside the library when the doors of the school are open. This is a widely used space now. There are classroom teachers who have projects and are in the library, and the librarian assists that teacher with students with research and writing, as well as it's used as you heard, a little more flexibly during study halls when students want to work in groups. So I definitely see all of that continuing. The spaces that were described tonight are much more flexible for the students. Right now, they're moving furniture to create some of those spaces, and to have the rooms that were suggested, all of that is widely used, widely used. I think this would be a great asset for many of our department teachers to be bringing students down to the library. I really do.
Yeah, I would add, I think the key word there is flexible learning spaces. If you walk in any new construction in a high school, you'll see libraries that are open like that. You see a lot of glass, you see a lot of conference rooms and classrooms, and just flexibility for kids to move around, particularly now with technology. You know, we asked that question earlier about technology. Most of it's Chrome work, small group working, and that flexibility, I think, is what we're looking for. And then you also want a space that is visually conducive for kids to want to come into, and that open space and the open lighting, I think would make that I'll say a key learning area in our high school. And I don't know, Mr. Kohler's here. I know he's the high school principal. Steve, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
I think similarly, the flexibility is the big asset from it. But right now, particularly that wall of rooms that's over on the left-hand side of that diagram, 3 of the 4 of those spaces are really inaccessible to students right now because of the way that they were constructed. This year, we've got the most number of students we've ever had in the high school. We were bursting at the seams. And so taking back some usable space and being able to utilize that with students, I mean, that maker space could be utilized by any class in the building in a really flexible way, particularly when we've got classrooms with fixed furniture where teachers can't do the kinds of things that they could do. I mean, that could be everything from a lab space to, you know, just a small collaborative space for students. And then I think the last piece of it, and I think going sort of to what Dr. Stout was saying, but you know, part of the work that we're doing as we support students in their own social emotional development and learning is to prepare them to go to college. Like that would be a space that we're trying to reflect what they're going to see in college. And so trying to support them to develop those collaborative work habits, to give them those spaces to be able to work independently and silently, whereas like right now they're just kind of all on top of each other, trying to build some of those skill sets that they can take here when they leave these walls and carry forward so that they're not dropped in an environment that looks very similar to that and they like don't know how to utilize it or take advantage of it.
Steve, while you're there, I mean, what about this space here as I mean, what do we use? I mean, we've been here for board meetings, right? So, you know, is this an extension of that library space and flexible space? How do you think about this room as it evolves?
Yeah, this room is used for everything and has been used for everything. Over the last couple of years, it's been a satellite lunchroom because we haven't had, you know, in our attempt to try to distance students and move folks apart. It was the yoga classroom last year. You know, this is our primary spot for testing. So, you know, when AP and IB testing comes about, Keystone testing, we're putting, you know, upwards of 100 students in here to test. This is a space that we would love to be able to utilize more for more formal presentations. I would selfishly love to use this for our staff development and to be the hub of where we're doing professional development in the school and to be able to do some large group things. You know, right now, this room somewhat suffices for that, but we really have a classroom and we have the auditorium. The auditorium is just not a conducive space to being able to teach and to grow and to develop. Like this is somewhat of that cohesive unit. And selfishly, I really love the idea of being able to open up that space out there and to have doors on either side and to have that courtyard then become an extension of this room. So we've got this being an extension of the library, the courtyard, which is really underutilized, being an extension of this room. I think it just opens up some more usable space for us. And again, when I think about, you know, students taking AP exams, Keystone exams, like really big things, like this just isn't the most motivating space to be able to do that. And giving them a really professional space, I think would be a great asset for our students.
How long is the library open after school for use by the students?
So it kind of extends. We have it open by about 7 o'clock in the morning and then through, I think, it's either 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we've got that a extra available space both before school and after school. And after school, it's a spot that, you know, sometimes students who are athletes will go in there and just do work before practice starts. That space hosts some different clubs and groups and activities after school. So it kind of, again, blends and does a couple of different things.
Can I ask about the espresso machine now, or all right, I'll let that one go.
Well, I
Not
did
letting
have,
it go.
wanted to go back to that alternate number 2 ductwork replacement. So I think, Jackie, you had mentioned that perhaps that would not be recommended. What are the pros and cons? And, you know, are we missing an opportunity if we don't do it now? Like, what?
to be honest with you, I think it would be good for Mike Shelgren to talk about that space, or Aaron Rothrock.
Yeah,
It
that
is
would
a
be
space that when it was prioritized by the librarian and by the staff, it was the lowest priority. But I'll let Mike talk a little bit more about that.
Good evening, everybody. That ductwork is actually above the offices and it blows into the library. Being an alternate, so when we go out to bid, we'll get numbers for like the base library reno, we'll get numbers for this, and we'll get numbers for ductwork. We're not committed to anything at that point, so we can decide to go with the base and not take an alternate. So I think it doesn't cost us anything at this point to at least get numbers for it. It's already been engineered. And at that point, we can decide based on when the bids come in, if it's worth reducing that white noise for what the cost is.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns about the functionality? Like, it looked like the shelves would be higher in front of that. So if we kept the same size ductwork, would it still be sufficient to get the air circulation in there?
For that section, yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's really all about reducing the white noise.
So Jackie, so if we, go through with this and we're, $1 million to $1.5 million over what we had allocated, and we pull that out of reserves, what are we sacrificing in the future that we were thinking of using those reserves for?
Are you saying if we go over this budget or go over the original estimate?
Go over our original estimate.
Our original estimate. To be honest with you, I'm looking at all different areas with which to cover the cost without sacrificing for the future. So for example, when the district service center, we're going to be under budget for that project. Because it was a renovation project, we always put in a contingency on that. So we're going to have approximately maybe $500,000 from that. There are reserves on the general fund balance that when we were moving into COVID, we were looking at things like charter schools. And so we have better estimates for those things now. So we could take a look at what is in reserve for something like charter school, and then we could reallocate that at the end of the year when we close our books. So there are different ways that we can use the resources without impacting the future.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
And then these are capital funds that are reserved for capital improvement
Correct.
projects, so it doesn't affect operating costs, or
No.
it's not going to affect taxes next year
No.
or anything like that?
No, not at all. And when we're doing our capital project projections, so we're going 5 years out, that's what PDE requires. We're going 5 years out, but we have more than 5 years worth of funding in the capital projects. If we only had what we were funding, we would have then no reserve at all, in the case something
Right.
came up a little bit over estimate or whatever, so. I mean, my recommendation would be to go out to bid to see where the market is. I'm comfortable with the numbers where they are now. If these numbers come in $1 million over, then I'm not so comfortable.
Right.
We're going to totally regroup.
Okay. Any other questions from any committee members? Just like to open it up to the public if anyone has a question or a comment on the library renovation.
I just wonder, let's see, I have to word this in the form of a question, Paul, for you. So I wonder why you guys can't include students in these ideas. Because I feel like I know more about what the library is used for than you guys. Does that make sense? And the students know it too.
So you think that the students haven't been included?
Well, I have been to every meeting except for last week, and you guys have never reported on this library project at all. Like, it came up once, one person.
Yeah, we can answer that. We can give it
Well,
that.
I remember one person asked about the comment about it, but there hasn't been any meetings or anything else, and I feel like now it's rushed. I feel like it's a good idea to do it, but I feel like you should get some student input from it.
Yeah, I think we should just address that because we
Sure,
had student input, so.
I'm happy to address that. Mrs. Chrisman did do a survey with students prior. Obviously, we're starting a new school year now, but there was a student survey and she incorporated staff input. There's a lot of input garnered from this building that is going into this project. I can assure you of that.
Is that for the public to see or to understand?
It was to inform, it was a survey done with students and staff to inform the architects in their design and in the use of the space.
Right, but
And so this is the public presentation of the outcome of the collection of all of that. I mean, this is the first time we could present this.
Right,
The
but-
design has just been completed.
yeah, but the way you guys have been presenting this with, I've come up and asked about having more committee meetings and more work sessions. And so the way it generally goes is you guys are having this meeting and then this will be on the next meeting to vote and then nobody will talk about it. So that's just why I bring it up because I actually had another question about the LGI design, right? Are there, I don't know what you want to call them, but are there sliders that come down to cover the windows up? There are. Yeah. I think, so also, with my question of why not include students? Like, there haven't been any students at the board meetings either. Why isn't there a student here tonight to actually listen to this and have some input? Other school districts have even 2 students that come to sit on the board. I feel like that would be helpful for
Ms.
everybody.
McCreary, we're just kind of limiting this to talking about the renovation of the library, so we can bring up procedures like that at the other meetings.
Okay. Like, so, all right, just from my standpoint, watching all this, it's difficult to see where the student input was. Like, it wasn't released in a survey and it said, this is what we found. Because the library is used for meeting places, so like, when I've come in for groups, whether it be PTA or mock trial, there is not enough space to meet in this building. So I think that's key. This room is used for more ways than you can imagine. ROTC meets in here, musical practice meets in here, the cheerleaders meet in here. This room is booked all the time in here. So I don't know whether it's, you guys are aiming to fix 2 little areas rather than looking at the whole overall piece. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
It's kind of a practical question about the lighting in here. Oftentimes in these spaces you need, I guess, almost area lighting. So when you're putting a presentation, you can have it dark there, you can still have a light where the other people can see. When we put the fancy lighting in, a lot of times it's like all or nothing. So I just wanted to know if you thought about that and the lighting in the areas. And
I can respond to that, and I'm sure Danny can as well. Yes, it's going to be controlled, dual zoned, or however do you want to speak to it more, Danny? But we did take that into consideration for sure.
Okay, any other comments from the board at this point? So I think we will be moving this on to a vote to send it out to bid at the next board meeting, is that correct?
Actually, what we would normally do is if the committee is comfortable with us going out to bid, we will go out to bid. Then what happens when we receive bids and we do the review of those, we'll have a recommendation for you whether or not to award contracts.
Okay.
So we'll proceed with the bid if the committee is comfortable. And
So-
then we will,
We have to take a vote amongst committee members then?
if you feel comfortable doing that, I'm fine doing that.
Yeah, I could move
Sure.
that we
That would be great.
pass this out to bid.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Okay. Thank you very much.
sure. Oh, you had a hand raised? We'll take a Zoom comment.
Please give your name and township residence, and it's on the library renovation. Dana Safone?
Hi, good evening. Dana Chaffone, East Vincent Township. I know with the capital funding projects, you're typically working from the priorities that were established in the feasibility study. Was the library renovation or media center, I don't know if it's like one term, was that a priority that was established in that study?
Would you like me to answer that, or do you want to, Mr. Friel? I know the answer. Okay. Go right ahead.
If you guys didn't. So this predates the feasibility study. This was the project that came about before we did, and was a priority project that was delayed, but it predates the feasibility study. And it's been, I think, kicked down a few times. And then with COVID, we put all the capital projects, including this one, on hold. It was originally going to go forward at the same time as the redesign of the campus up here and stuff like that. So it got kicked out of the COVID project and then put back in. So it predates it.
So is there a point at which you're revisiting that feasibility study if things that maybe aren't on it? If that was 2017, I think the feasibility study was 2018. So I just find, I mean, it's just a little interesting that it didn't just get a mention if it was agreed to by that board that was in place at that point. So is that something that you're then revisiting with the feasibility study at some point? Because I guess my question is, are you saying that this should take precedent over some of the other things that were rated higher priority, like, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but the performance, I think the performing arts wing was one example. So are you like constantly going back to realign those priorities, and when would that be discussed?
So we did go back when we came out last year at the beginning of the process after the COVID, and we said we're going to revisit the capital. We did have a meeting and reviewed all our the feasibility study and we asked for the administration to review the feasibility study along with us and any changes and recommendations. At time, there was not any change in recommendations in the priority order of capital projects. So the feasibility study projects priorities remain as they were in 2019 when we did them, and they were reaffirmed last year. I'm not sure which meetings, but we went over a couple of the meetings that we went over those priorities with.
Okay, sorry, I have like two more questions. When you're saying about the capital funding and maybe looking at, I think charter schools was mentioned. So if something comes in, under budget, that could maybe be used, as, because the numbers are coming in higher, obviously, as compared to 2017. But that wouldn't be the charter school budget piece is in the general fund budget, correct? Not in the capital fund? So I got confused on that, sorry.
Sure, I'm happy to clarify that. The operating costs for charter school expenditures are in the operating budget, their expenditures. In 2020, we designated a portion of the general fund balance to charter schools. So that wasn't part of the operating costs. I'm trying to see if I can explain this properly. It's on the balance sheet as a designation of fund balance. In the event, we knew our charter school costs were going up, and they did. So we are using a portion of that. We did use a portion of that to help balance the prior year budget. There are extra dollars in there that would be released from reserve if the board so wishes and moved over to capital.
And the reason, Dana, that capital is involved in that equation is the way we created the reserve is we did not take over the 1 mil over. We suspended that, which was a capital by policy. We take over 1 mil over. And then during COVID, because of these unanticipated costs, or we weren't sure of it, we suspended the movement of the money to the capital account, created that reserve. And that's why that reserve would kick back to the capital account if it doesn't get used.
Okay, I'm aware that you did that, and then that got moved this year, that got reinstated and got approved to get reinstated this year. I just think, it's still being put towards this project. If it comes in now, let's say at 3 million. So there's like, you're making a decision to spend that money there. So I think, that's just, it could be, I guess if it's going to capital, it's going to capital, but then, yeah, okay, thanks for clarifying that. And then the last question I had was about, sorry, can't remember. Oh, I had the same question about, was there a study done for the current needs and future needs and usage that would get student input? And sort of the same question as that was just asked, sort of looking for that piece of it. And then the last question I have is, were there any alternatives looked at where it wasn't sort of the whole, you know, redo of the library? Were there any, like, you know, option A, B, or C, where you were just doing, let's say, the classrooms, or, you know, some of the other changes, but not doing the entire project, just in terms of looking at scope and cost?
So there were, the breakout on the scope and cost is the separation of the LGI, the HVAC, and versus the library right now. I don't think there was a smaller breakdown within the library and subsetting it up in the area of classroom versus the core library structure. So it was the core library structure renovation as a project with the additional, could we do LGI? Could we do the HVAC upgrades? Those are the ABCs of the project. It's not broken down further than that. And Dana, you had another question in there. I wasn't sure. Maybe if you can write us an email to follow up on that one, because that had sounded like it had a little more detail to it, and we can put it back to the administration on that one.
I think we're good. All right. Moving on. Let's see, we've got agenda item 2.02. Oh, thanks, Danielle. Appreciate it. Item 2.02, District Service Center update. Jackie and Mike.
Sure. Actually, I'm going to turn it right over to Mike because he's really been spearheading this project and he's in the process of moving from the warehouse over there. So there you go, Mike. All yours.
All right. So it's been a little while since we talked about the District Service Center, so I just wanted to give everybody an update. So as of 12 days ago, we received our TCO, which is our temporary certificate of occupancy from the township. So that allows us to fully utilize the building the way it's intended. So there's no restrictions. We have a short list from the township that, of like punch list like type items that have to be resolved before they give us our final CO, which we expect probably November, December-ish. And the thing that's really pushing that out is the new generator is still on back order, which, you know, procurement issues. We knew that since day one. So right now we have, you know, since we got the TCO, we've been moving in as aggressively as possible. So we've actually had maintenance staying in the evenings, moving stuff over from the old warehouse or the current warehouse. We also worked this Saturday moving stuff over. And I'd say at this point, we're probably maybe 35% moved, and we'll be 100% out before October 1st. So the move is going in 2 stages. So the first stage, we're really concentrating on getting out of the leased warehouse. Then the second stage is moving over the facilities offices, which we're hoping to do sometime in October. So that's about it for the District Service Center.
I can add one item. I know we've had some requests for an open house, Dr. John. So once Mike gets fully moved over there and gets his staff over there, we're thinking probably sometime in October, maybe late October, we'll have an open house. Okay?
Thanks, Mike. Any other questions on the District Service Center? Committee members? Okay, item 2.03, the Gasa project, Guaranteed Energy Savings Act. Update with Mike and Jackie.
So the Giza project, the majority of that project was scheduled for the summer. It was a huge project. The biggest pieces being North Coventry and French Creek chiller plants. Tremendous amount of work to be done over the summer, and the goal was to get both plants up and operating before the students arrived, which I'm happy to say occurred. So we had air conditioning in both buildings for the start of school. Another big part of this Giza project was the LED lighting upgrades. So at this point, I'd say we're about 95 to 98% done. So all classrooms are done, corridors are done, common areas. The last 5%, it's another procurement issue. It's some of the real specialized lighting, like the auditorium and some of the dimmable lighting. They're still waiting for some of the parts to come in. But once those come in, they'll put those in right away. And any work going forward, the last 5 or 3% is going to be done on second shift, so it won't interrupt anything during the day. There was a portion of this project was building envelope, tightening building envelopes for all across the district. So what they did was they went around last winter and did a thermal imaging camera of all the buildings, found the leaks in the buildings. So this summer they went around and took care of all that, which was caulking openings, resealing doors, windows, that kind of stuff. So that part is 100% done. And then the final major component of the Gasa project was retro commissioning of existing HVAC equipment and doing some ATC upgrades. And at this point, I'd say they're about 90 to 95% done with that as well. So overall, very happy with the way the project went, and very little disruption to any of the occupants of the buildings. And like I said, the goal that we had set for the contractors to have everything up for today did happen. So.
Any questions on the Gasa project?
Yeah, so I'm from West Vincent Township, and we actually have like a group in the township looking at energy improvements and trying to put together a plan for, I think it's like getting off of fossil fuels by 2025 or something. And they would like to involve the school district in these discussions. And I think that this Gasa plan is right in line with what they've been talking about. I know I passed some documentation to Jackie. Have you seen that also?
Jackie did share a little bit with me.
Okay,
I didn't review the document in detail, but she did review some of it with me, and she had a couple questions for me.
Yeah,
So,
there's just one section in the, because there's two sections. There's like a municipal plan, and then there's a community plan. So at the end of the community plan, there was a section for involvement of the school district. And I think we're right in line already with what they were talking about, but building improvements and LED lighting and all that, certainly we want to make sure that we communicate back to the community all the improvements that we're making, so they're aware too.
That's great, and I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mrs. Munchin, just to give you an update about that, I actually have a call with, I think his name is Kirk. Okay, so for tomorrow afternoon, I have a call with him. And then anything that comes out of that discussion, if he wants to talk to Mike, or if he would like Mike to do a presentation or whatever, we can certainly accommodate. But I do think it's a good idea to put some things on our website about what we're doing in the energy conservation realm. We can certainly do that.
Right, he's been asking me questions, and of course, I can't remember the details. I'm like, well, we're doing stuff. I know we're doing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a review of the estimate savings we were going to have over 10 years would be very helpful too.
Absolutely. We'll definitely be doing that.
Okay, anybody have any other items they'd like to discuss regarding finance, buildings and grounds? Okay, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you.